right into the grim tales of Wild West tragedies that cast long shadows over America's history. The Wild West has always fascinated us with its tales of cowboys, outlaws, and rugged frontier life. But beneath the romanticized stories lies some truly dark and tragic events that shaped American history. From infamous shootouts to notorious betrayals, these moments paint a vivid picture of a time when life was as unpredictable as the landscape. Let's delve into 13 of these somber episodes. 1. The gunfight at the OK Corral left a bloody legacy. The gunfight at the OK Corral was one of the most famous shootouts in Wild West history. According to the Arizona Republic, on October 26, 1881, in Tombstone, Arizona, lawmen Wyatt Earp, his brothers Virgil and Morgan, and their friend Doc Holliday faced off against the Clanton-McClory gang. The confrontation lasted only 30 seconds, but left 3 men dead and several others wounded. The shootout was the climax of a long-standing feud between the Earps and the Clantons, fueled by accusations of cattle rustling and lawlessness. The event has been romanticized in numerous films and books, but it was a brutal and chaotic moment that highlighted the lawlessness of the time. The aftermath saw continued violence, with Morgan Earp later being assassinated and Wyatt Earp embarking on a vendetta ride. 2. The massacre at Wounded Knee was a tragic end for the Lakota Sioux. The Wounded Knee Massacre on December 29, 1890, was a devastating event in American history. U.S. Army troops surrounded a camp of Lakota Sioux near Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota. As soldiers attempted to disarm the Native Americans, a shot was fired, leading to chaos and the indiscriminate killing of men, women, and children, as described by National Geographic. The massacre resulted in the deaths of over 250 Lakota Sioux, marking a tragic end to the Indian Wars. It remains a somber chapter in U.S. history, symbolizing the loss and suffering endured by indigenous peoples. 3. The Dalton Gang's last raid ended in a hail of bullets. The Dalton Gang, a notorious group of outlaws, met their end during a botched bank robbery in Coffeyville, Kansas on October 5, 1892, as detailed by Legends of America. The gang, led by brothers Bob and Grat Dalton, attempted to rob 2 banks simultaneously. However, the townspeople were alerted and armed themselves, leading to a deadly shootout. The raid resulted in the deaths of 4 gang members, including Bob and Grat, while Emmett Dalton was captured and later imprisoned. The failed robbery marked the end of the Dalton Gang's reign of terror and highlighted the growing resolve of communities to defend themselves against lawlessness. The event is remembered as one of the most dramatic and deadly confrontations in Wild West history. 4. The hanging of Tom Horn was a controversial execution. Tom Horn, a hired gunman and detective, was hanged in Cheyenne, Wyoming on November 20, 1903, as reported by Eyewitness to History. Horn was convicted of murdering 14-year-old Willie Nickel, but his trial was highly controversial. Many believed the evidence against him was circumstantial and that he was a scapegoat for larger tensions between cattlemen and homesteaders. Horn's execution remains a topic of debate, with some viewing him as a cold-blooded killer and others as a victim of a flawed justice system. His life and death epitomized the complex and often brutal nature of frontier justice. Horn's story continues to captivate those interested in the darker aspects of Wild West history. 5. Jesse James was shot in the back by a former gang member. Jesse James, the notorious outlaw, was betrayed by someone he trusted. On April 3, 1882, James was shot in the back by Robert Ford, a member of his own gang, as described by PBS. Ford had conspired with Missouri Governor Thomas T. Crittenden to bring James down in exchange for a reward and a pardon for his own crimes. The assassination took place in James's own home in St. Joseph, Missouri, as he was dusting a picture on the wall. Ford's act of betrayal was seen as cowardly by many, and he was forever branded as the man who shot Jesse James. Despite the reward, Ford's life was marked by infamy,
and he was eventually killed in a barroom brawl in 1892. 6. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a crushing defeat for the U.S. Army. The Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand, took place on June 25-26, 1876. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer led his 7th Cavalry in an attack against a coalition of Native American tribes, including the Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. Custer underestimated the strength of his opponents and was overwhelmed, resulting in the deaths of Custer and over 260 of his men. According to the National Park Service, the battle was a significant victory for the Native American forces led by Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. However, it also galvanized the U.S. government to intensify its efforts to subdue the Plains tribes. The defeat at Little Bighorn highlighted the fierce resistance of Native Americans to the encroachment on their lands and remains a pivotal moment in the history of the American West. 7. The Lincoln County War was a bloody feud over land and cattle. The Lincoln County War in New Mexico was a violent conflict between rival factions vying for economic control. It began in 1878 when a group of ranchers, merchants, and lawmen clashed with a competing faction led by wealthy cattle baron Lawrence Murphy. The war was fueled by corruption and greed, with both sides committing atrocities, as suggested by Spartacus Educational. The conflict culminated in the 5-day Battle of Lincoln, which left several dead and the town in ruins. Although the war eventually subsided, it left a lasting impact on the region and highlighted the lawlessness and brutality of the Old West. 8. Wild Bill Hickok was shot from behind while holding the dead man's hand. Wild Bill Hickok, a legendary gunslinger and lawman, met his end in rather an unexpected way. On August 2, 1876, while playing poker in Nuttall and Mann's Saloon in Deadwood, South Dakota, Hickok was shot from behind by Jack McCall. Hickok was holding a pair of aces and eights, now famously known as the dead man's hand. McCall's motive was reportedly revenge for an earlier slight, but he was ultimately tried twice for the murder. The first trial acquitted him on dubious grounds, but a second trial under federal jurisdiction found him guilty. McCall was hanged for the crime in 1897. Hickok's death marked a tragic end for one of the Old West's most storied figures. 9. The murder of Pat Garrett was shrouded in mystery. Pat Garrett, the lawman famous for killing Billy the Kid, met a mysterious end himself. On February 29, 1908, Garrett was shot and killed near Las Cruces, New Mexico. The circumstances of his death remain unclear, with various theories suggesting motives ranging from land disputes to personal vendettas. Garrett's death was a stark reminder of the violent and unpredictable nature of the Old West. Despite his fame, he faced numerous challenges and threats throughout his life. The unresolved nature of his murder adds to the intrigue surrounding his legacy and the turbulent times in which he lived. 10. The death of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid remains a mystery. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, infamous outlaws and leaders of the Wild Bunch Gang, reportedly met their end in a shootout in Bolivia in 1908. However, the exact circumstances of their deaths remain shrouded in mystery, with some believing they survived and lived out their lives under assumed identities. Their exploits, including train and bank robberies, made them legendary figures in Wild West lore. Their supposed deaths in South America added to their mystique and left many questions unanswered. Whether they perished in a foreign land or escaped to live in obscurity, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid's legacy continues to captivate the imagination. 11. Billy the Kid was gunned down by Pat Garrett. Billy the Kid, an infamous outlaw known for his youthful face and deadly aim, was killed by Sheriff Pat Garrett on July 14, 1881. Garrett tracked Billy to a ranch in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, where he shot him in a darkened room. The kid's death at the age of 21 ended a short but violent career that saw him involved in numerous skirmishes and killings. Billy the Kid, whose real name was Henry McCarty, became a symbol of the wild, untamed West. His death was the result of a determined manhunt by Garrett, who had once been his friend. The kid's legacy lives on in folklore and popular culture, but his life was marked by hardship and a relentless pursuit by law enforcement. 12. The Ludlow Massacre was a deadly labor dispute. The Ludlow Massacre on April 20, 1914, was a violent confrontation between striking coal miners and the Colorado National Guard. The miners, many of whom were immigrants, were demanding better working conditions and pay. The conflict erupted when the National Guard attacked a tent colony of strikers, resulting in the deaths of over 20 people, including women and children. The massacre was a pivotal moment in the labor movement and highlighted the harsh realities faced by workers in the early 20th century. It